UFC Fight Night Cannonier versus Borralho might be one of the worst fight cards we have ever seen. It feels almost cynical how bad this card looks. I really considered not covering this card at all, but the inner hardcore in me told me, no, Rich, that's not acceptable. You're not some fair weather casual, who's only going to go outside when it's sunny and blue skies. Sometimes you gotta risk getting your Jordans a bit messy, okay? And it's not all bad. It is a great card if you're really into WMMA because they've managed to fit 3 of those fights on here. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I am still going to do picks for the cards because apart from anything else, I want to track my wins and losses. But I'm not going to be breaking down these fights. I'm just not. Aside from the main event, which obviously I'm going to talk about here, but it's just a total waste of time to break down most of these other fights. I mean, half these guys are making their debuts, so I don't even have too much to go on that without going back and watching all of their old fights. And even then, in some of these random promotions, you get so much fake data anyway. I always say it like half the time when a new guy comes in to face like a UFC vet or just someone who's had some UFC fights, I'll very often just back the guy who's had UFC fights, even if the guy coming in's got an undefeated record or something like that, because as long as the vet's got some wins in the UFC, I can really gauge him. I feel like I know roughly where this guy's level is. The guy coming in can be complete fake data, beating up on bums, like you just never know. So yeah, obviously that's not a hard and fast rule, but just as an example, it just doesn't make sense for these debut fights. And then looking through the card, I'm like, so many of these fights are just so bad. They don't really warrant the time. There's no storylines. It's just it's bad. This is a really, really bad card. I can't lie. People have been complaining about a few bad cards this year. But this is up there. This is definitely up there with the worst. Yeah, on UFC 305, I got 7 out of my 12 picks correct, which is absolutely horrendous. So yeah, here's hoping to do a little bit better this time around. But before I get to all my picks, I'm going to break down the main event first, of course, which is Jared Cannonier versus Borralho. Now, Jared Cannonier, which is sometimes easy to forget because he is always in such phenomenal shape these days. He is 40 years old at this point, and he's coming off that infamous loss, obviously, to Imanov, which is one of the worst stoppages of all time. Absolutely horrendous. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube, I think, as a free fight. Go back and watch it. It is terrible. Like round 4. It's been a back and forth fight up until this point. Cannonier probably edging it, but Imanov's like really started to take over. He does hurt Cannonier, but at this point, again, round 4, I feel like the way he was moving, he just looked tired aside from anything else. Maybe he was a hurt, but this not close to being finished. I mean, he could have been finished. Don't get me wrong. Like it definitely looked like he was on the brink of possibly being finished, but we hadn't even entered into like that finishing sequence yet, if that makes sense. He was in trouble. He was in trouble for sure, but it was a horrendous stoppage. Stopped way too soon. So yeah, that's what he's coming off on. Now, the thing that worries me about Cannonier is, as I said, even though that was a really early stoppage, obviously he did take a lot of damage, especially towards the end of that fight. And this is a really quick turnaround. That fight was only in June. So, you're only talking like 7 weeks ago or something like that. And he's already fighting again, maybe 8 weeks ago. But yeah, it's a really quick turnaround after taking quite a lot of damage. And he's obviously 40 years old at this point. So to be doing like the quickest turnaround of your UFC career, age 40, is a bit worrying. Borralho's obviously a lot younger, taking a lot less damage. He's undefeated in the UFC. But, he also hasn't fought anything like the level of competition that Cannonier's had. He's currently ranked 12 at middleweight, but hasn't actually fought anyone inside the top 15. So I think this fight is definitely like a litmus test for him. To sort of see that he definitely does belong as a ranked fighter. I also think the UFC made this fight for that reason and because they think it is a possibly winnable fight for him. And probably, secretly, they'll always be impartial. Of course, publicly, they'll always be impartial, but I think they probably do want Borralho to win this one because, Jared's getting old. Not really a big name in the sport. Never, he had a fight against Izzy and so on, but he never really, his name didn't really ascend to the forefront of your mind when you think about middleweight. So yeah, I do think this fight was probably booked to facilitate like a changing of the guard potentially, right? So yeah, it does feel like that. But at the same time, I'm taking Cannonier in this fight. He's got lots of 5-round fight experience, where he's always shown good cardio. Again, when you're this age, each fight, there are no guarantees. Just because you look good or show good cardio in your last fight, it only takes a second to look immediately washed. But I'm going with the evidence of my own eyes and not just speculating. He's got that former heavyweight strength. He's also now got that old man strength, never underestimate old man strength. But yeah, to get more sort of specific, I just think he's got better stand up than Borralho. He's got nasty leg kicks. I remember when he caught Anderson sort of just behind the kneecap with a leg kick and just ended the fight just off that one kick. He doesn't have the best jiu-jitsu, never has, never been a submissions guy, never goes for submissions in the UFC. And, if Cannonier gets you to the ground, he's going to be looking to get into mount or possibly some kind of side control with you sort of laid out on your back and pound your face in, basically. He's got really nasty ground and pound, really nasty down elbows. So, yeah, I think it probably favors Jared to keep this fight standing if he can. Borralho is a legit black belt on the ground, and he'll be more comfortable, I think, than Jared in the scramble exchanges. Borralho does have decent stand-up. He's shown some relatively sort of crisp, basic boxing. Does like to throw in a high kick every now and then, sort of mix it up. But what I've noticed about Borralho is he does like to move forward, and he swings with a very upright stance with his chin in the air. It actually kind of reminds me of like Alex Pereira, like in a very different way, but his body posture is like incredibly straight and his chin is there to be hit sort of in parallel, like right on center. Like his chin is always on center. But obviously the difference is Alex has a super long reach at middleweight and also at light heavyweight, and way better distance management than Borralho, obviously. And Borralho isn't exactly tall for middleweight, so that really becomes a problem when you're leaving your chin in the air and you don't even have like the best management of distance. He does also like to do these bursts when he comes in the striking, where he sort of dives in, not quite sort of Duplessis levels of Bart Simpson windmilling, but he does kind of like charge forward a little bit. So he is definitely it's definitely possible that Jared catches him in. Jared has great power in both hands and clips him coming in. I could easily see that being part of this fight. Borralho does have really good judo and takedowns, though. I think he's most likely going to want to try and close the distance safely. Again, he really needs to respect Jared's power, because if he just does some of the things I've seen him do against some of these bums, basically, that he's been facing, like, he is going to get clipped. So he needs to really try and close the distance, get in the clinch, and then try and get Jared to the floor. I would imagine that's got to be what the game plan is. Avoid the lottery on the feet, because, where the striking's concerned, I think Jared should be pretty heavily favored here. He's got that heavyweight power. He is much more dangerous on the feet. I mean, I'm part of the reason I'm also picking Cannonier here, of course, is like I'm just mainly going for eye test on this one. Like, if you look at the records, and I believe Borralho is actually favored with the odd makers, but I haven't seen myself anything like crazy high level from him. I think he's had some pretty favorable matchups up until this point. When he fought Oleg then went on to lose like 3 straight fights after that, got finished twice, and didn't look amazing in that fight. Guys like Paul Craig is just like complete mincemeat on the feet. And, what I will say is Borralho had the fight IQ, right, that was high enough at least to every time he sort of clipped Craig and he went to the ground, he wasn't generally following him to the ground, which a lot of people have done. Paul Craig's even submitted people like that, where they have him hurt, he falls down, goes into sort of ready to assume position on the bottom, and they just dive in, and Paul Craig ends up subbing them. Like, so he actually fought that fight pretty sensibly, but again, it's like you're playing against a one trick, right? You know exactly what he's going to do, and but he didn't fall for it. But again, Paul Craig to me is just like complete cannon fodder at this point. So yeah, I'd say I just haven't seen enough yet to say with confidence that Borralho is actually on that elite level yet. As I said, I know that he's favored with the bookies, but I'm definitely going for Jared Cannonier with this one, and I'm gonna say by decision. Jared definitely has the power to finish him, but Borralho is a lot younger. He's never been finished himself. Obviously, he only has one loss, and that was outside of the UFC, and he wasn't knocked out or anything like that. He's never particularly been close to getting finished from, if memory serves, from his time in the UFC. So he's not taken that much damage. His chin should be pretty rock solid at this point. So even though I wouldn't be like amazed, obviously, if Jared knocks him out, Jared could knock anyone out. I do think most likely this will go to the decision. I do think Borralho will probably get him down once or twice, and probably be able to control him on the ground as well when he does, at least in part. But for the most part, I think this will be a fight fought on the feet. And over 5 rounds, I think Jared will win the majority of exchanges. So yeah, I think Jared definitely has the power to knock him out for sure. But I'll say he takes this by decision. And, you know, I guess I should be rooting for Borralho here because just much like the UFC or how I'm speculating the UFC are thinking about this fight, I don't really know what you do with Cannonier if he wins. I guess he's still like hovering around that top 5 even after his loss to Imanov. Like maybe you do an Imanov rematch actually. That's probably like the most logical thing. That's probably the thing that should happen actually if he wins, because if he loses, I think he's just like completely out of the picture, and you know, realistically at his age, he's just never going to get near a title shot again. So this is like do or die for Jared Cannonier, like for sure. If he loses this fight, essentially his career is over. It doesn't mean he will never fight again, but essentially his career is completely done. Whereas Borralho obviously has much more time on his hands, and if he wins this, if he beats a legit sort of top 5, 6 guy, then yeah, you're looking to set him up with another one, and preferably someone coming off a loss, right? Because I think it's something the UFC, it's very difficult to struggle with because a fight's always going to favor one guy's career over the other guy's career, generally speaking. So what you usually like to do, or what I would do if I was running the UFC, is if there's someone in that top 5, 6, 7 who's like recently lost a fight, then you know, you compare him with that guy, and then it seems less unfair than someone who should be in like a number 1 contender spot or whatever, and then you're like pairing him with this young blood who's, you know, ranked 8 places below you. So yeah, that's probably what will happen if Borralho wins. But yeah, I am taking Jared Cannonier by decision. Right. Let's quickly go through the other fights. I'm not breaking down these fights. Again, I'm just to remind you, I'm not breaking down these fights. I'm just going to really quickly go through them. So yeah, I'm going to go Wang Kong over Victoria Leonardo by decision. I'm going to go... Oh, didn't want to do that. Wow, what is my mouse doing, man? I hate this. I'm going to go Nathan Fletcher over Zigomantis Ramaska by submission. I'm going to go Jacqueline Cavalcanti over Jose Nunez by decision. You can tell I know a lot about that young lady on the left. James Lontop by decision over Borshev. Gonna go Zachary Reese to beat the fake JDM, aka Jose Daniel Medina, by TKO. Gonna go Francis Marshall over Dennis Bazookia by submission. And then Edmund Shabazian by any way he wants versus Meerschaert. I think that is a comfortable win for my boy Edmund. Going to go Michael Moraes to beat Neil Magny. Probably by decision, that one. I think Magny's super durable. Sorry. I said I wouldn't break down these fights at all, so sorry. I'm sorry about that. Michael Moraes beats Neil Magny by decision. And then we get to the people that I don't know these people. I don't know them. So yeah, I'm just gonna say my Marion Santos over Can Offley by decision, and I will take Robert Valentine over Ryan Loader, probably pronounced. I'll take that by submission though, because I do think when I had a look at these guys, when I was, I did look at their records. I haven't really watched their fights, but I was seeing, their background, which promotions they fought in, what their records look like, and so on. He did seem to be a bit of a submission guy. So yeah, I'll go Robert Valentine over Ryan Loader by submission there, and. Tabitha Ritchie over Angela Hill by decision, obviously. So, right, that's going to basically wrap up this video because, as I said, I don't really have much more to say about that. This card is a disgrace, in my opinion. There is absolute... By the way, I live in the UK, right? So, for people who don't know, this fight card starts at, like, midnight, and then the main event will happen at like 6 a.m. So imagine my level of investment that I feel I should have towards this card versus like, a 307 or a 308 or something like that was obviously announced recently. I will be breaking down those cards ahead of time in much more detail because, for every bad card that the UFC has had this year, they have booked some bangers as well. So, it's not all bad. I guess a good card can't be amazing unless you have bad cards to contrast it with, right? So, we've got to live through the tough times again to earn those blue skies and those peaches and creamville moments, to quote the late Lucas Tracy, rest in peace. He's not actually dead, by the way, just in case any of you are worried, but he has departed the space. But anyway, yeah, that's going to be it this time, guys, for my quote-unquote breakdown. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time for what is hopefully a much better card.